get to the bag, ayy. Got the foot on the gas, pedal to the metal when the lane moving fast, ayy. Let them all cross. If they hate, then let them hate and make a bigger boss, ayy.
This episode is brought to you by SPI Logistics, the premier freight agent logistics firm in North America. For over 40 years, SPI has been diligently building the most successful freight agent network to provide first-class relationships for our shippers, receivers, and carrier partners. We are more than another transportation network. We are a dedicated team of professionals united by one singular purpose, and that is to expedite our agents' success. All of our agents are set up for success on day one, as they are provided with a full suite of support staff that is ready to assist them with everything from after-hours emergencies to financial and administrative needs on a no-fee basis. This way, you can focus on continuing to grow your business. There is no financial risk to start, and you have the ability to earn up to 75% in commissions. If you are looking to take control of your financial future and build your business with the backing of one of the most successful logistics firms in North America, visit www.spi3pl.com to learn more. Do me a favor and let them know that the Freight Coach sent you.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back. We are live. It is the Freight Coach Podcast, the top podcast in transportation, coming to you guys every single weekday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central, to break down some industry headlines. But most importantly, you guys provide some actual insight into what you can do with all of this information. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. This is the real side of freight, ladies and gentlemen. And I do say this before every single show. And what I mean by that is I only speak with transportation professionals, because at the end of the day, I want to talk to the right individuals who have done what you're looking to do or who are currently doing what you're trying to achieve, so you can take that information, apply it, utilize it, and see a meaningful difference in your business and your life. Happy Friday, everybody. We're going to get right in. We're talking strategies today. What can you implement into your business to see success in 2026? And what does that look like? And I have my good friend, Mike Riccio, back on the show to break this down. And for those of you who don't know Mike, I'm going to let him introduce himself here, because he's got more experience than most people could even dream of having in this industry. And that is not a jab at your age, Mike. I just realized.
Say, Chris, that's only because I'm an old guy. That's what happens when you hang around all these years.
You know, it was because when we were talking off air there, you're like, oh, I started in 1987, and I didn't want to say it. I was 1 year old when you started.
Yeah, I actually started full-time in 1987 working for my in-laws. I was in charge of sales and business development for a regional truckload operation that my in-laws owned, about 100 truck operation. So that's where I cut my teeth, and I will bore your audience with the story that I told you behind air. But needless to say, my father-in-law was I loved working for him, but it was black and white. There was no gray, right? So I tell that story a lot. So I'm Mike Riccio with More Than Miles Consulting. Been coaching and consulting in the logistics space for the past 4 years. That's how Chris and I got to know each other initially, through some of our interactions in this space, as well as previous to that, I was in charge of sales and marketing for Leonard's Express, a hybrid truckload operation, both trucking and brokerage operation located here in upstate New York. My three brother-in-laws run that company. And through the course of that, working in the family business, I've been part of the Transportation Intermediaries Association. The TIA was involved with that organization and association on the board for many years, was ramped up. I don't know how they allowed it, Chris, but somehow I became chairman of the board and was on the executive committee for a period of time. I just recently have rolled off the board this past April. So just a little bit about me, and the majority of my time is really spent in go-to-market strategies, sales strategies, and trying to find some business.
What are some of these things, Mike? What are some of these principles that you think have not changed about going to market or business development? Because there's a couple of key things that I've seen out there. And then actually my guest on the show yesterday, and if you guys haven't listened to that episode, John Pruitt laid out a masterclass on what they are looking for. And in full transparency, do not blow up his DMs, you guys. But he laid out everything that's important to a company of his size. And then he also laid out what their biggest pain points are with their providers. And I look back at this stuff, Mike, the fundamentals are always going to win. And that was very evident in speaking with him yesterday.
Yeah, look, I've said some of what you're here today. It's going to be, if anybody's heard me speak before, it's going to be a little repetitive, but it's true, right? So people like to buy; they don't like to be sold, right? They want to buy, and a lot of salespeople are they haven't really thought through what is their value proposition, why people should choose them, what's their ideal customer look like, and so a lot of times they're going after business that they shouldn't even be going after, and what we tend to forget as a salespeople is we have to figure out a way. Two things. How do we make the individual, either A, if they're a current customer, or B, a potentially new customer, how do we make them look like a hero to their boss and to their customers? And B, or maybe this is A, how do we figure out a way to reduce their landed costs, right? How to reduce their transportation costs, right? And look, it's a competitive market, but it's still, and there's a lot of automation, there's a lot of technology, and we'll talk about a bunch of different things, I'm sure of those today, but it's still about relationships, and it's still about understanding the problems that this potential customer or current customer has, and how do you provide a solution, and how can they trust you to provide that solution. And I think all of us sometimes on both sides of this equation get too transactional, and we've got to step away and really stop to think about how can we make this individual or this company look good, to their customers, or this individual look good to his or her boss.
What does a successful relationship look like to you? Because obviously that's a term like that's thrown out there a lot, and I think my definition of a relationship when I was younger is vastly different than what it is now, and I think a lot of that comes from the sweat equity that I've had to invest into building, really both of my companies up. Because like I had 0 customers in either business that I've built here over the last 5 years, and when I was working for somebody else and I had a paycheck coming in, my definition of a relationship probably looked a lot different than it does now when I've been involved since day one, dollar one. I know the difference of what a really good customer looks like and maybe a not so good customer looks like. But I also understand the importance of me operating in the same manner, no matter what, whether the relationship is going to work out long-term or not, and how that pattern is more needed in the long-term success of you as the individual.
Yeah, I'll preface your question first with a statement, then I'll come back to kind of answering kind of what I think. Some of it is I think pretty basic and well known. I always, when you're looking at 26 and you're looking at a relationship, you need to control what you can control. And I've talked about this before, right? We're always talking about when's the market going to turn? When are things going to get busier? When is this going to happen? When is that going to happen? Oh, geez, we've got tariffs here. We've got the economy here. We've got interest rates here. We've got new technology here. I think it's good to be educated on all of those things, but you really need to control what you can control, right? And what you can control is you can control your sales plan, right? You can control how you're going to go to market. You can control your response to the market. You can control i.e. your behavior. You can control your culture. You can control your messaging, and you can control your effort. And if you do that, you're going to attract good quality business or attract people you want to work with. And really, Chris, some of this is corny and cliche, but let's be frank. A good relationship is about trust. It's about, open and honest communication, right? And really, if you can do just those two things, and how do we build trust? How do we build that communication? How do we ask questions? How do we lead in a vulnerable manner? We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, right? You don't have to have everything figured out. Customers, they know when they're being snowed or lied to, or someone's embellishing. You don't want to be that individual, that unfortunately takes time, right? And that just doesn't happen overnight. Customers, why should they give you their business? Why should they trust you? You've got to figure out a way to do that. And that's a little different for each relationship. Like we talk about leadership and motivation. Some people need a kick in the butt. Some people need a pat in the back. And it's up to you to figure out when you're doing that, who needs what. And it's the same when you're trying to build a relationship, specifically with a shipper, is what makes this tick? What makes this shipper tick? Some of it is price, but some of it is security and getting the freight there. Getting the freight there, right? Number one, getting it there claim free. Some of it is we need to understand some of the buying behaviors and some of the behaviors of who we're dealing with, and can we tailor a solution that fits their buying behavior and their personality without quite frankly compromising who we are, right? I'm not saying you should just roll over kiss people's behinds. It has to be a two-way street, because if it's not going to be. We both know, we've both been there. It's going to be short term, and usually we're going to be on the losing. Typically you're going to be on the losing end of the stick. But there's a lot of 600,000 to 700,000 loads still move every day, right? Every single day, and so somebody has to move that freight.
Yeah. No, I can, when you're talking about open and honest communication, for example, I think a lot of people think it's only applicable when things are going right. Like when trucks are on time, picking up on time, delivering on time, delivering damage free. And they're missing that other component of the relationship of like dealing with challenging situations and the importance of that. I think like it is more important to open and honestly communicate with your customer when you're in the middle of a shitstorm than it is when things are going right. And I think like people approach that backwards. And I say that with confidence because like I used to do that, right? Like I used to be like, oh shit, I just hope that this stuff works itself out. And eventually you realize that those skills are the differentiators out there in the market, because, you've brought up technology, everything else. Like it's about as level of a playing field as I've ever seen in this industry, with access to information, access to technology. It's all out there. Whether a company chooses to implement it into their organization is a different conversation, but the tools at your disposal now, whether you're a C.H. Robinson, which is the largest freight broker in North America, or a one-person startup out of your bedroom, you have just as much access to that information. And your ability to operate and execute is going to be the differentiator. And it's not when things are going right. It is when things are going wrong, your ability to solve a problem, your ability to communicate that is what separates you from everybody else. Because most people, when they're faced with an adverse situation, they run and hide and they hope it works itself out.
Right. Yeah. And two things. I totally agree with that, Chris. It's how people deal with situations when things are going wrong, right? You hit the nail on the head. And I'm a big believer in that. I try to do this both in my personal life and professional. I think I've got it figured out not for the most part, but doing it much better professionally. I still have some work personally, but let's deal with the pink elephant in the room. Let's have this conversation. If the truck isn't going to be there, or you made a commitment that now you can't meet, if you just try, I mean, we've all been there. We've heard this saying, one lie begets 1,000 lies. At some point in time, it's going to catch up with you. And along the same lines of everybody has the same access to this information and technology today. I find it really interesting, and part of it, since I've been in this space the last 4 or 5 years, is people will go spend tens of thousands of dollars on new technology to improve to automate something or improve a process, or potentially a lead pipeline generation generator, but they won't put tens of thousands of dollars in training into their people, and their people are what sets you apart, right? I mean, let's be honest, we all deliver freight from point A to point B. Now, some of us might specialize and have some niches that others don't have, that have something unique that sets you apart. But for the most part, we're somewhere on the spectrum of delivering freight. And so, how are you going to differentiate yourself? It's your people. How you communicate those situations, how you deal with those situations, How do you, what does good leadership look like? What does good communication look like? What's the execution look like, right? And so for me, it's like, how do we invest in our people from a talent pipeline to improve their skill sets, whether it's be the actual tactical execution of blocking and tackling on a daily basis, or long-term, from a cross, functional perspective, training as far as, how to improve, your operations, right? So I think that you've really got to think through as you go into next year, what's my strategy? I always talk about this. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be sophisticated. It doesn't have to be in a PowerPoint presentation or some, project management tool, but you've got to be thinking about in an intentional manner, how do I build this roadmap? And then that doesn't mean, like, when I talk to entrepreneurs, Chris, people get a little itchy when I say, let's build a roadmap, because they're like, hey, like everything, we don't want to miss opportunities. Well, I'm not saying miss opportunities. Here's your roadmap. This opportunity comes over here. It's not on your road, but that doesn't mean we should look at it and investigate it. And maybe that's something we should do, or you should do. And so then you adjust your path. But what it does is it slows you down to be thinking through judiciously, should we do this or not, or stay on this path? And, I think you should be thinking about a growth strategy, an operations strategy, a talent strategy. And they can have just 2 or 3 bullets under them, right? On M&A strategy, maybe you want to go out and buy a smaller operation. What's your tech strategy? And again, it can get, I think people can sometimes tend to over-engineer it and overthink it. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's like, let's just take those categories. Let's pick 2 or 3 things. And then what do you want to do to achieve those? And then at least you're bringing some, again, I'll come back to it, intentionality to how you're trying to run your business. Because as you well know, you and I were talking about it before we jumped on, distractions occur, mm-hmm. right? Shit happens, yeah. Right? So if you got that roadmap, how do we come back to that, right? We just brings us back to our focus and where we're trying to get to, because this business isn't for the faint of heart.
No, it definitely isn't, Mike. And I think like distractions are at an all-time high out there, right? Yeah. Like you look at it, again, I'm not picking on any freight technology company that's out there at all, but like, I think that there's a lot of people, business owners, who think buying technology is going to fix their problems. Technology is a tool. It's not a like part of your game plan and your growth strategy, right? Like it's a tool for you to utilize. And I say this often, like if you're going to implement automation into your organization at all, you better iron out your processes first, because otherwise you're just going to have automated shitty processes. And that doesn't do anybody any good. And then I think like there's an over-reliance on technology where they're like, the freight, like the carrier vetting software told me this. Well, you didn't think to call the driver or call the carrier or do anything further than that. And I think like there's an over-reliance on stuff. And that's why it's like the more and more people I talk to, I mean, I'm just going to rely more and more on my gut instincts in a lot of these situations. And again, you guys, I talk about everything we do internally on this show. Like I'm not holding anything back, because nothing I do is proprietary at the end of the day. But I think what is the big separator out there is going to be that balance of, yes, you can implement technology in your operation, but like you got to actually do the fundamentals of this job and stick with that, right? Because it's like, I know, we'll just touch on freight fraud here for a second. Everybody's talking about it out there. A lot of these fraudsters, Mike, and I know that they're getting more sophisticated. There's a couple of key identifiers that they all can never answer. And that's how I know if somebody's full of shit or not when I'm talking to them on the phone. That's why I don't want an AI carrier rep out there. And again, I'm not here knocking any company in particular, but there's a couple of key parts of my organization that I will never automate, because an instinct, right? And because the human instinct, my gut is rarely wrong at this point in my life. I'm not 15, 20 years old anymore. Like I've been through enough, talking to enough scam artists in my life where they all kind of fall under the same box and criteria. And I think when you automate that, that's when you're openly exposing your organization to let them in the front door, because there's no checks and balance.
Well, along those same lines, it's about balance, right? It's like, where do we, as you indicated, where do we use technology as a tool to either automate a process that we want automated, or to reduce some friction somewhere within this process, right? To make that individual's job easier, right? So, and I think what happens, or what I've experienced, Chris, is everybody is like, everybody's got, I always say that everybody's got TMS envy. Well, I think right now everybody's technology envy, right? They're always thinking about, what my competition is doing, how they're using the tool. You should be worrying about how your own operation and what works best for you, because what might work for you, Chris, doesn't work for CH Robinson, or what might work for CH Robinson doesn't work for another large, TQL or Echo, or another, or Arrive, or another large, entity that operates in that space. It's what makes sense for you and your culture, your operation, your book of business, your customer base, and your employees. And then let's really talk about we've talked a little bit, prior to this meeting, is our carriers, right? How does that all come together, right? And what makes sense for you? And there's some stuff that, you should, but everybody, that we put our ego up, and like, hey, I'm using this tool, I'm using this tool, I'm using this tool. Okay, are you using them to the extent that you should be? Are you getting the productivity out of them? Really, maybe you only need one of those tools, and you're better off to do the others manually, and not just to look cool because you got a cool tech stack. It's really doing a little bit of a reconciliation, a tech reconciliation of what's working, what's not working, and be open and honest with ourselves of what tools work for us based on all those other factors compared to somebody else.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Tech envy is a very real thing out there. And, I think like you see, I use Robinson as an example a lot, and I'm not ripping on that organization at all. I have the most respect for CH Robinson and what they do out there. But like at the end of the day, what they implement in their strategy is not applicable to like 99.9% of the market, like at all, right? Like pay attention to what some of these large companies are doing, but like they move more freight in an hour than most companies do in a year, right? So it's like what their tech strategy is and their implementation and what they're doing is probably not applicable to you, right? And then but again, I get it, right? You look at it, you're like, oh, the big dogs are implementing this, I must need it inside of my company. But again, if you scale it back even further, are your carriers or are your customers asking for this? And if the answer is no, you probably don't need it. And if you look at it from a cost perspective as well, because again, the financial viability of your organization is going to be coming under intense scrutiny over the next probably 36 months. And if you do not have clean financials, or if you're operating on a razor thin, like you will be disqualified for working with shippers in the very near future. That will become, I think, a top criteria point, because you look at the amount of bankruptcies that are happening, not just in freight, but across the country right now, you guys. We are in extremely volatile times out there in the economy, and that's not being talked about at a level that, at least that what I'm seeing, it's not being talked about at a level, and it is going to be a major point of emphasis on a company, especially when you're soliciting business. You don't know what the picture looks like either. They're not in a position to say, pay you $100,000 in freight spend. You go bankrupt, and then they got to pay another $100,000 to those carriers, right, because they're going to get sued. Right. Like, this is a very real conversation that will inevitably happen here.
Well, and that comes back to understand as a broker, understanding your cost to serve. What does it cost me to cover this load? I mean, so many times you talk to somebody, well, I was making, 15% margin, or 225, margin per load. Well, that's great, but if your cost is 16% or $250 to fixed cost to cover the load, you're losing money. And so just, and a lot of people still aren't, they're just trading cash, right? They're not understanding, where am I making business and where am I not? And I'll have conversations, Chris, about, specifically as we're working maybe with somebody about putting a strategy together about a sales plan or go-to-market plan. And they're doing a piece of business that I know is under what, at a margin level that's lower than it should be. Like, I want to get my foot in the door. I want to build a relationship, and I'm going to grow it. I'm like, okay, I hear you. We can question that that strategy, but I understand that strategy, then put yourself on the clock. And they'll be like, well, what do you mean? And I'd be like, okay, if your cost is this and you're doing the business for this because you want to build a relationship, then at some point in time you want to get it here and then make some money, that's fine. What's the timetable that if you don't get it up here that you're going to step out of the business or raise the rates? Because all you're really doing is just making yourself feel good and going broke quicker. And so you have, so give yourself a timetable. I'll question you on that theory, but or on that strategy, but it's your business. And if that's what you want to do, then we've got to pick a date that if you don't have that changed, you need to raise the rate or get out of it. Cause you're just kidding. We're not doing this for practice. You're just kidding yourself.
That right there, Mike, what you're talking about, like that comparison is the thief of all joy statement that's out there. Like there are companies who they have raised so much capital, they have money to burn. All right. Like that. And again, like I could argue what's a more successful entrepreneur, somebody who they may have built $1 billion, top line revenue company that's out there, but they've never made $1 because they had so much money. They were able to overinflate their product offering. I don't know how much of a success that company is overall, as opposed to the guy who bootstrapped their business up to $50 million a year by taking the slow and steady approach. And then they own 100% of their business, right? Because like what you're talking about there, Mike, from my standpoint, I would rather take 5 years to grow with an account and not compromise on price than go in cheap and try and raise my rates. That's a losing strategy because good luck raising your prices, especially in the next freight cycle that we're about to go through. If you're a broker, that I don't want to say you're going to fail, but like you are going to have a very tough time if you sold low to get in the door. If you think you're going to be able to raise your rates, so like it's not going to happen. They're going to be like, get out of here. Why did you quote me $200 on this load if you knew you couldn't move it for that? That's going to be the question, and then have fun answering that one.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And really that also comes to, we need, I'm talking to brokers ad nauseum about understand your carrier's costs and the relationships with your carriers. What does this cost? What does it cost? And how to, a trucking company to operate, try to make some money, because you need to have some sort of carrier strategy or capacity strategy, whatever you want to call it, carrier relations program. Are you meeting with your carriers? Are you calling your carriers? Are you having quarterly reviews with your carriers? Even if you don't do that, are you understanding, hey, look, Mr. or Mrs. Carrier, where do you want to go? Where do you make your money? What's not a good area? How can I find some repeatable business for a carrier? Because let's be honest, when the rates move, the carriers are going to go to where the dollars are. They're going to have to. They're going to have to, because so many are bleeding so bad. So how do you mitigate that flight? You're going to have carrier flight. So how do you mitigate that? You mitigate that by building trust. You mitigate that by working with them. That doesn't mean they won't leave, but maybe you reduce how many leave. And so you've got to have some sort of understanding. You can't just keep, Chris, I love it. I'll talk to a broker, and they'll have in their marketing material partnerships and long-term relationships and mutually beneficial relationships and carrier of choice. And then how are we incentivizing the guys and gals on the floor for the biggest margin, the biggest buck they can get? Those two don't equate. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with hitting a home run. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is you can't, if you want to be here when things start to tighten up or things start to turn, you need to figure out how to improve the relationships with your carriers and what drives them and where they, how you can help them make money. Because if you're not helping them make money, you're not gonna have somebody to haul the freight.
Yeah, it's very true, Mike. I appreciate your time, man. How does anybody? Yeah, I'm gonna have to have you back on, because again, I love having you on, Mike, because you did it at Leonard's, and now you're doing it in your consulting business, and you're helping companies through it. And it is so important to understand how everything actually works in this industry, because if there's one thing that is certain is like the way you operate isn't going to change. Like a successful operation, they run the same playbook no matter what's going on out there in the market. And these success leave clues. And you got to pay attention to that stuff. But how does anybody reach out to you, Mike, if they want to connect and find out more about what you got going on?
Sure. That, they can email me at mike@morethanmilesconsulting.com. That's mike@morethanmilesconsulting.com. I know it's a mouthful. They can ping me on LinkedIn or they can send me a text on my cell, 585-734-3699. Happy to take it.
Perfect. Mike, thank you so much. If you guys can't find him out there at all on social media, hit me up. I will gladly put you guys in contact with him. But that is going to be it for today, ladies and gentlemen. As always, if you got value in what you heard and you're not subscribed, subscribe to the show, you guys. And if you're feeling ambitious, rank it on iTunes and Spotify, because if you see value, your network's going to see it as well. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys. And we'll be talking to you soon.
Came back with a bang, window down,